For decades, the United States controlled the global energy market. But now, Canada is stepping in, and Washington is struggling to respond. Why? Because Europe, once the biggest energy customer of the United States, is now shifting its focus to Canada. And this shift is not just about Canada's vast energy resources. It is about stability and trust. While the United States experiences policy changes with every new administration, Canada has maintained long-term, reliable trade agreements with Europe. And here is the most critical part. Canada's clean energy revolution aligns perfectly with Europe's green energy goals. Meanwhile, the United States still depends heavily on fossil fuels, making it a less attractive partner in the global transition toward renewable energy. Police cars revolving like the consequences are enormous. Europe was once the largest buyer of liquefied natural gas from the United States, generating billions of dollars in revenue every year. But now, as Europe turns to Canada, the United States is at risk of losing a massive share of its energy exports. This is not just an economic setback, it is a direct challenge to the energy dominance of the United States. But this situation extends far beyond energy. Canada is now emerging as a major supplier of critical minerals used in electric vehicle battery production, which strengthens its role as a key partner in Europe's clean energy future. Meanwhile, strict environmental regulations in the United States are preventing it from competing in this market, giving Canada an undeniable advantage. And here is where things become even more concerning. For years, the United States has used its energy exports as a tool of influence in global politics. But if Europe can now depend on Canada instead, Washington's leverage over its allies begins to weaken. Is the global influence of the United States fading? White right pointing backhand index. Is this the beginning of a major power shift? Can the United States regain its dominance, or is it already too late? Canada and the United States are now locked in an escalating trade war, and the consequences could reshape both the North American and global economies. The United States has recently imposed tariffs on Canadian imports, including energy products, and Canada has hit back with retaliatory tariffs. But this is not just another trade dispute. This is an all-out economic battle with energy at its core. Canada is already taking steps to diversify its energy exports, and its focus is shifting toward Asia, especially China. The expansion of the Trans Mountain Pipeline, which is designed to increase oil exports to China, Japan, and South Korea, proves that Canada is actively reducing its dependence on the United States. Meanwhile, China, with its massive energy demands, has become a vital trading partner for Canada. If this trend continues, Canada could further limit its reliance on the United States, sending shockwaves through the global energy market. Police cars revolving light. But here is the real danger. What if the United States suddenly lost access to Canadian energy supplies? The results would be catastrophic. The United States imports over 6 million barrels of oil per day, with nearly 6 to 7% of that coming from Canada. If Canada decided to cut off or even reduce its oil exports, gasoline prices in the United States would skyrocket overnight. The Midwest region would be hit the hardest, as its refineries heavily depend on Canadian heavy crude. This would not only drive up fuel costs, but also increase production expenses across multiple industries, including transportation, food, and consumer goods. The price of nearly everything would rise, potentially triggering a severe recession across the United States. And here is the real problem. United States refineries are not equipped to process other types of crude. If Canadian oil stops flowing, refineries could be forced to shut down, causing a massive economic ripple effect. Some corporations, like ExxonMobil and Chevron, might benefit from the crisis by ramping up shale oil production. But there is one major issue. This process cannot happen overnight. White right pointing backhand index. Is the United States walking into an energy disaster? Could this trade war be the final push that forces Canada to cut ties with Washington? And if that happens, how will the United States recover? Is the United States walking into an energy crisis? Canada's next move could change everything. The United States is now facing a major crisis, and it may have no easy way out. Even if the country ramps up shale oil production, replacing Canadian heavy crude is nearly impossible. Why? Because doing so would require massive investments, years of development, and would face environmental opposition. Meanwhile, the global energy giants, the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, Russia, and China, are watching closely. If the United States struggles to secure oil, these powerful players could step in, manipulate global oil prices, and expand their influence over the energy market. Could this be the moment Washington loses its grip on energy dominance? Police cars revolving light. The Biden administration is now at a crossroads. Does it continue the trade war with Canada, risking economic chaos? Or does it negotiate a new deal to protect American interests? If the United States chooses to persist with tariffs on Canadian imports, Canada might strike back by cutting off its oil and electricity exports. The result? A devastating spike in energy prices, a destabilized economy, and mounting pressure on Washington. There is one other option: increase domestic oil production and reduce dependence on Canada altogether. But there is a catch. Environmental and regulatory roadblocks could make this solution incredibly slow and costly. Even if the United States pushes for energy independence, would it be too little, too late? But Canada is not waiting for the United States to make a move. In response to the tariffs, Canada has launched a nationwide boycott campaign, urging its citizens to support domestic products instead of American imports. The response has been swift. Provinces like Quebec and Nova Scotia have already removed American-made alcohol from store shelves as an act of resistance. This is no longer just a trade dispute. It is an economic war. Explosion symbol, and the impact goes far beyond energy. Major United States manufacturers, especially automakers like General Motors and Ford, are deeply dependent on Canadian raw materials. If this trade war continues, production costs could surge, factories could struggle to keep up, and American manufacturing might be pushed to the brink. White right pointing backhand index. Could this crisis push the United States into economic turmoil? Will the Biden administration back down, or will Washington fight to maintain control? And if this war escalates,